This morning's gospel reading is extremely appropriate for the day after the day some of us had yesterday, because 1, 2, 3, 4 of us, and maybe Jen, I don't know. Jen, are you out there? Jennifer Charlo, are you out there? Does anybody know?
Jen and Ruth were on.
Jennifer.
Jen's right down the lower left.
Jen is, yeah, Jennifer's there. And Ruth Dancer, are you there too?
Yep, I'm here.
Yep, and there's Ruth. All right, so those 6 people, all of us were huddled around our own personal little computers yesterday from about 10:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. And we were all engaged in a shared exercise. And the shared exercise was for us to try to find a sense of what we believed as a wider Anglican community on these islands and inlets. So Vancouver Island, the Gulf Islands, and somewhere way up north. I forget what that part's called. But anyway, all of us were gathered. I don't know, how many people? 160 people gathered on their computers. And we were engaged in a process of trying to discern what we believed to be the will of God. It's a bit of a daunting prospect. We were engaged in a process of endeavoring to discern what we believed to be was the will of God to bring among us in this diocese a new person to be in leadership as our bishop. And I don't know what everybody else thought or thinks that we think we were doing in that exercise, but it's an interesting exercise. How do we discern the will of God? It's precisely the question that is raised by our scripture reading this morning. And it comes up right at the outset when Jesus is challenged by the religious officials of his day. Matthew says, when Jesus entered the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him as he was teaching and said, "By what authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority? Where does your ability to teach and speak and tell these truths, where does it come from? What's the origin of the things you're telling us?" They knew very well for themselves where their authority resided. It resided completely and solely in the traditions that they had inherited. They understood that God had revealed God's self at some point in history, and that nothing had changed from that moment on. And their job, their only job, was to take what had been revealed originally and try to enforce it on their community. They were the law enforcers. Now, I think in our gathering yesterday, we did not in any way want to dispense with tradition. We did not in any way want to discount the wisdom of our forefathers, foremothers. We did not in any way want to discount the history of our diocese and of our life together. We did not in any way want to discount the ways that God has worked in our community in the past. But I think we also understood, and I think Jesus understood, that there is something more to discerning the will of God than simply abiding by the traditions and patterns and convictions and habits of the past. And so Jesus told them this kind of quaint story about 2 sons. The father of these 2 sons instructs them to go and work in the vineyard. The first one says, "I won't go," and then goes. The second one says, "I will go," and then doesn't go. So Jesus asks the pointed and challenging question: which of the two sons did the will of his father? Yesterday we were trying to discern the will of God. But what does that mean? What could it possibly mean for God to have a will for us, for our actions? And how could we possibly be expected to discern that will? Well, we have to start, I think, by asking ourselves, what is it that we believe is the will of the Father? What is it that the Father intends or wants in our lives and in our conduct? And if you look at the two sons, it seems at first glance that the will of the Father is very clear. The will of the Father is that the two sons would go into the vineyard and work. Get busy, do the job. And there are a lot of versions, it seems to me, of the Christian faith that sound pretty much like that. God's will for us is to get busy, do a good job, be always active, be out there changing the world and creating all kinds of wonderful things and making sure that the job gets done. But you know, Jesus starts off talking to scribes and Pharisees, the rulers of the religious system of his day. He starts off talking to the elders of the people, the chief priests in the temple. And those are all the people who did the hard work for God all the time, every day. They were always busy working for God. But they weren't, it seems to me, in Jesus' understanding, they were not doing the will of the Father. The will of the Father is revealed in this story in a slightly more subtle way. It comes in the account of the first son. The first son who says, I won't go and work. And then Matthew says later, he changed his mind. That's the will of the Father. The will of the Father is that we might have a change of mind. I'm not super keen on the translation of this term. It doesn't really resonate very strongly. The word is meta-meleomai. Meta-meleomai. It's two words actually put together. Meta means change, but melomai comes from the verb melo, to take care for, to care for. So literally it means to change what you care about. To change what you care about. It's really about a change of heart. That is the will of the Father for us. That we might experience a change of will, a change of heart, a change from our will being at the center of the universe, which is where some of us live quite a bit of the time, a change from our will being the center of the universe to the will of God being the center of our lives. The first son goes and does as the Father directs because something shifted inside of him. He came He came to a deeper place within himself. And I think yesterday, all of us gathered for our electoral synod. We were united in a single desire. And our desire was to find within ourselves that place that knows what we believe authentically and genuinely to be true and genuine in life. We were not looking for the right answer to a puzzle. We were not looking for the right way to apply all of the old traditions and patterns of the past. We were looking for something genuine that resonated in our hearts, and then we were to vote. The Archbishop who led the meeting called us before every vote. Now I said in my letter there were 6, but there were actually 7, weren't there? It's a number, eh? I got to get it wrong. So there were 7 ballots, not 6, as I said in my email. There were 7 ballots, and before every ballot, the Archbishop caused us just to stop, and she rang a bell. And we were intended just to be silent. And what we are intended to do in that silence was metaleomai. Metaleomai. We were intended to change what we care about, from what I want to that deeper knowing. Because what I want just happens kind of in my head. What I want just happens in my sense of need and desire. What I want happens in my sense of ego. What I desire, what I think is the right thing for the universe. Jesus calls us to come to a deeper place. You know, for many people, there's been a version of Christian faith that says, if I want to know the will of God, I just think up the one thing I most don't want, and that would make me most uncomfortable. And that's the will of God for me, right? So God is certainly going to send me to be a missionary in some remote part of the world where there are scorpions and bugs and snakes and spiders. Okay? Absolutely. I know that's the will of God for me because it's not what I want to do. But I would resonate much more strongly with Psalm 37, verse 4. Where the psalmist says, take delight in the Lord. Take delight in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Think about that. The will of God is actually what your heart desires. And what your heart desires is the will of God. The trick is to get to the heart. The trick is to find that deep, inner, abiding place of truth that is your truest nature, that is the presence and love and wisdom of God dwelling in you. It is there in every living human being. The problem is we get distracted. The problem is we get hung up on what I need, what I am determined is the right way to go, what I have decided is to happen. And we forget to stop and hear the bell and go back to that quiet, steady place that is the presence of God dwelling in our lives. See, the problem with the scribes and the Pharisees at the beginning of the story is they put their religion in the way of their heart. And we can do that with all kinds of things. The challenge is to come to the place of the heart, to listen deeply. And that requires vast opening vast flexibility, vast willingness to be the son, the daughter, who is willing to have a change and go to the heart and leave the small will of my ego behind.